to left. Thank you. That should do. Should we just try a chord? Okay, that one's not on. You're going to take it to the car? Okay.
Under other duties, I'll pour water. Okay, good. And so, A and B, I will call out your time. The students are handing out little slips right now. Okay, it worked really well. Okay. Jen, I like the idea of the wild cards, so if we're just asking one guy, the other guy goes. I did a similar later this week with wild cards. We had not as many candidates as and so one person was getting asked question after question. Some of the new Teale Phelps Bondaroff. Double last name is confusing. Okay, so should I call you Mr. Phelps?
Good evening, everybody. We're just cruising past 7 o'clock right now, and I know we were supposed to start at 7 o'clock, but we are clearly seeing some people trickle in. So we're going to take a few more minutes before we actually get down to business here to get everybody organized and everybody in their places. We appreciate your patience, and thank you all for coming. I'll introduce myself in a minute. Hello? Hey! Te- testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. It's awful reverby, hey? Okay. I'm gonna
Check test, check test. It sounds like it's going to be really waffly. I don't know, maybe I should just go acoustic here.
Let's give it a whirl.
All right.
We'll try a couple bars.
All right. Okay, this song is hot off the press. I think we're going to get a little balance here. So hope you like it. Could it be time for a change in the way we vote? Could you dig a different way of electing your MLA? Could it be time for a change? No more perverse past the post. Now's the time to have your say. Will it be yes or no? Because democracy means you and me are supposed to have a voice. Now's the time to have your say. It's time to make your choice. First past the post, winner take all, or proportional representation. Now's the time to make your call. Step up and take some action. Could it be time for a change in the way we vote? Could you dig a different way of electing your MLA? Because democracy means you and me are supposed to have a voice. Now's the time to have your say. It's time to make a choice. First past the post, winner take all, or proportional representation. Now's your chance to make the call. Step up and take some action. Could it be time for a change in the way we vote? Could you dig a different way of electing your MLA? Could it be time for a change? No more first past the post. Now's the time to have your say. Will it be yes or no? By golly, now's the time to have your say. Will it be yes or no? Mail your ballot. Now's the time to have your say. Will it be yes, yes or no? Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Carol. That was wonderful.
Excellent. How about now? Okay. Thank you so much to the organizers for putting this together. This is an important piece of this referendum, is to have community-based public conversations about the decisions we need to make about how to do our democracy. So I'm not going to argue on the yes or the no side. I'm not part of the debate portion of things, but have the privilege of nerding out first to paint the picture too of the kinds of conversation we're having. So the details, what systems we're dealing with, the kinds of decisions you'll need to make, okay? Actually, hold on, go back for a second. The first thing I'm gonna do though is give you the broad view of electoral systems. We're going to have a debate about no to PR or yes to PR, but we can actually think about families of electoral systems. So I'm gonna introduce those briefly and then focus on the 3 systems that are actually on the ballot for you after you make that first choice about yes or no, okay? So the first of 3 big families of electoral systems is the first past the post system and majoritarian systems. You know first past the post, it's what we use. There's 1 representative per every geographical area per riding. And the winner is just the person who gets the most votes. They don't have to get a majority, they just need to get a plurality. So this is what we do now. Majoritarian systems are similar in that they have 1 representative in 1 geographic area, but a majority is required. So if a majority is not selected off the first round, there's a second round or an alternative vote used to get to that 50%. But again, 1 person per 1 geographic area, okay? Then, broadly speaking, we have proportional representation systems. These systems generally have more than 1 elected official per riding. This is necessary to achieve that proportionality. And when we say proportionality, what we mean is the proportionality, the link between the votes cast by citizens and the seats won by parties. Is there a proportional link there? Okay? Tons of the world uses this. Belgium, Netherlands, Switzerland. But the key is that these systems vary significantly. They look very different. If all we cared about was proportionality, we'd have 1 province with 87 MLAs distributed to the parties based on votes received. But that's not what we're doing, and nobody's proposing that, because we care about a host of things in our electoral system, proportionality being one of them. So different proportional systems go about it differently, achieving that link between votes cast and seats won, while also trying to meet those other things we care about in our electoral system, okay? So these systems can vary a lot, whether they have open lists, that is, you as voters get control over the individuals who are elected, or what we call closed lists, where seats are distributed to parties based on the % of the vote they receive, but it's actually parties who have the most control over who those individuals are in those seats, okay? Your experience as a voter will differ under different PR systems. You might vote for 1 party, you might vote for 1 individual within a party, you might have the option of ranking different candidates based on your preference, okay? And the extent to which your vote actually counts, I don't mean for the seats distributed, but in terms of the individual elected. In the Netherlands, you can vote for an individual candidate, but it doesn't often impact whether that individual's elected, just whether the party receives the seat. In Switzerland, you can cross people off lists, you can vote for 1 person in 1 party and 1 in another, you can vote for somebody twice. You have tons of control over the individuals who you're selecting, okay? So there's lots of different ways to do this. And then broadly speaking, we have mixed systems. Systems that use some first past the post and some element of a proportional system, okay? And this is New Zealand and Germany are the 2 big ones that are comparable to us that use this, okay? So we have these 3 big families, first past the post, a majoritarian, proportional representation, and then some mixed systems. So what's happening here? What are your options here? Okay, you can just go to the next one too. Has everybody received their ballot? Okay, some here, nice, nice. If you haven't or know people who haven't, you can call Elections BC and get one. So do. It's not over. Okay? On your ballot, you have two questions, right? The first is, do you want to keep first past the post or move to a more proportional system? Right? We're having that debate tonight. But there's a second question as well that asks you to rank 3 different options of proportional representation. The way this ballot is designed is to give you all kinds of flexibility on how and whether you answer these questions. So you can answer the first one only, yes, I want to move to proportional representation, or no, I'd like to keep first past the post. Or you can answer the first one and then also answer the second one. And you can do this whether or not you want PR or you want to keep first past the post. If you like our system, you can say that and then say, but if you're going to move to PR, this is how I prefer these systems. You can select just one of the 3 options or rank all of them 1, 2, 3. There's lots of flexibility in how you as a voter express your preference. Okay? Okay. So the question that's going to be debated tonight is that first one. Do we want proportional representation or keep first past the post? Who voted in the last provincial or federal election? Right? I would anticipate good voter turnout in this room. You know how this works, right? You have a ballot with a bunch of names, people associated with parties, a few independents, and you put an X by 1. The winner is the person who gets the most votes, and you have 1 MLA or 1 MP for your riding. This is business as usual. If you select this, that you'd like to stay, business as usual, okay? But you might pick, after the debate tonight or as you continue your research, to move to a more proportional system. Then you have more choices to make. What we're doing right now is an exercise about democracy, and part of it is also having these discussions or thoughts about which of those options you'd like. Okay? The PR systems are similar in terms of what they produce for proportionate outcomes, as in they'll all give us far more of a relationship between votes cast and seats won, but they do so in different ways. Again, proportionality is just one thing we care about in our electoral system. We care about other elements, so they go about meeting those other needs in different ways. Okay? Okay, mixed member proportional. This is one of the options. So I'm going to go through the 3 of them now. This is that big family that I talked about at the end. It retains some of first past the post. You will vote how you do now. This will be half of your job, is to vote how you do now for one person to represent your electoral district, okay? But you have 2 votes in this case. The second one is towards this goal of proportionality. Parties will get a share of the seats in correspondence to the share of the votes they got. But there are some unanswered questions about this one. There are different ways to do this, as I said, for the proportional side. So on this side, you see the mock ballot from Elections BC. You have 1 vote, your district vote, same as you do now. That's going to get you your local MLA. And then you have a party vote, okay? What party do you like? That could be different than who you elect as your individual MLA, okay? And this vote will then determine your regional MLAs. Okay, so you'll have a set of regional MLAs and your local one. And that addition of the regional MLAs are done to achieve proportionality. But on the other side is the mock ballot from the PEI referendum. There, instead of choosing the party of your choice, you choose the individual of your choice within the party of your choice. Okay? So it's a different way for you to express your preference. Rather than indicate just the party, you could say, I do like party A, but I actually like candidate D in that the best, so that's who gets my vote. Okay? So we don't quite know how this one will look. That's an unknown question about how you'll engage with your ballot on this particular question. But we do have a sense, broadly speaking, of what it will be like. You'll have 1 MLA for your district, and then there will be these additional regional MLAs. Option number 2, rural-urban. Okay? This is a made-in-Canada hybrid. Tonight, but also quite often, folks ask me why there's not single transferable vote, STV, on the ballot. There kind of is. Okay? This system uses STV in a lot of the province. What it does is make a distinction between rural ridings and urban ridings. It's trying to maintain urban ridings to have representation so they don't get so big they're hard to represent. So what it looks like is STV in urban areas, right? And that's what your ballot looks like. You don't just get to pick one party or one candidate, you rank them. And you can say, I like candidate D in party A, but I also like candidate C in party B. And you can rank them close together. There's an increase in voter choice under this system, okay? And then all your ranking is distributed to select not just parties that win seats, but the individuals who win them. The rural part of this is that MMP will be used in the rural areas. That means those larger ridings up north, right, are going to have one MLA that represents their geographic area, and then regional MLAs, right? Down here in our urban areas, we could have between 2 and 7 MLAs. So your ballot will look different if you're voting in Victoria Beacon Hill than it will if you're voting in Fort St. John. Different systems are being used. Okay? And again, this is try to achieve the proportionality but offer some respect and recognition of how huge our province is. Okay. And then the last one. This is another made in Canada system. Okay? This, like rural urban, hasn't been used before. That doesn't scare me. We could try this out. It adds proportionality but keeps much of the look and feel of first past the post. Okay? Ridings get bigger by double. In some places, this wouldn't matter that much, right? You probably don't recognize when you cross from Victoria Beacon Hill to Victoria Swan Lake, right? So the combining of those two doesn't lose a sense of local geographic representation, but they are bigger. But instead of having one MLA, you have 2. When you go to vote, you see parties with pairs of candidates. So there'll be 2 candidates, a primary and a secondary candidate, right? Independents can be on this ballot in the same way, right? They have about as much of a shot now as they do as they would under this system, which is to say, not great. Okay? So your first MLA for this larger riding is elected just how it is now. Whatever party gets the most of your votes, doesn't have to be a majority, but a plurality, their primary candidate is your MLA. Okay? The proportionality comes in the distributing of these second MLAs. The votes across the whole province matter, right? So if one party has 40% of the votes, they're going to get 40% of the seats. And we know that electing your one MLA under first past the post doesn't lead to very proportionate outcomes or has the capacity not to. So MLAs, those second MLAs, will be distributed to ridings based on how popular they were. But both your MLAs will run locally. Both your MLAs will appear on your ballot and on no other ballots, right? But whether or not you get the next most popular or the third most popular in your riding depends in part on how those votes are across the whole province. So you may have 2 MLAs from 2 parties, 2 MLAs from 1 party, right? There's going to be some variation across the province, but you're going to have 2 MLAs. Okay, so those are the 3 options. I'm happy to chat further after the debate if you still have additional questions. But as you're listening to the yes versus no, also keep in mind that you have some choice and power over actually what it looks like in the end and how you as voters can interact with your ballot and how you will, in the years between elections, interact with your MLA. So do think through that as you also consider answering the second half of the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Grace. That was very informative. Now I would like to introduce our moderator for tonight, Michael Prince. Michael J. Prince is the Lansdowne Professor of Social Policy at the University of Victoria, where he currently teaches on health policy, disability issues, and Canadian government and public administration. His first recollection of elections and voting was hearing his parents and relatives discussing the 1962 and 1963 federal general elections. That's beyond my time. Over the past 20 years, Michael has been a frequent in-studio commentator on provincial and federal elections for CBC, CTV, Global, and Czech TV. Michael has also been a consultant to Elections Canada, the independent, nonpartisan agency to the Parliament of Canada, providing research advice on how to make voting more accessible to electors facing barriers to participation. This summer and fall, he has been hosting a show on Shaw TV about BC referendum on electoral reform exactly, called Voting for Change. So tonight he'll be assisted by timekeeper. Do we have timekeeper? Don. Thank you very much. And Don is the chair of the Victoria Community Association Network. So over to Michael Prince to introduce some of our panelists tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Perhaps I'll stand now, but I'll sit so I don't upstage our two main presenters and speakers tonight. So my job is to introduce our two main speakers and just to outline to you in the audience something of the format. So our two main speakers are, first of all, I'd like to introduce Dr. Teale Phelps Bondaroff. Teale is speaking on the yes to PR proposition. And Teale is a local researcher and a high school debate coach, so that's maybe going to come in handy tonight. So watch out, Bob. Watch out. There you go. If that's not enough, he has a PhD in politics and international studies from University of Cambridge. He also runs his own research consultancy, something that he shares with Bob Plecas, and that they've both been consultants over time. Teale's is called the Idea Tree, which conducts issue and strategy research for environmental groups. Teale has been active in federal, provincial, and municipal politics, not only here in BC, but also in Alberta. He's currently the president of the Saanich Gulf Islands NDP Riding Association. And in 2006 and 2008, he ran in Calgary West for Parliament. I'm assuming he didn't run for the Conservatives or he'd be in the House of Commons. Just a hunch, but anyways. And he recently ran for Saanich Council. And if you are tweeting along with the debate tonight, you can tag Teale at Teale, T-E-A-L-E, P-B, at Teale P-B. So there you go for you tweeters out there. For the no side, my pleasure to introduce Bob Plecas. Thank you. A long bio, which I'm just going to hit some of the quick highlights here. Bob joined the BC provincial government in 1973, rose to the rank of deputy minister rank, and he worked under 5 different premiers, 25 different cabinet ministers, and 10 different ministries. There's probably a few that I can think of that in recent times in public service that can claim such a wide and extensive contribution to public service. Thank you, Bob. In one ministry, he had responsibility for what was then called the elections branch, prior to it becoming the independent organization we now know as Elections BC. Bob left the government in 1991, and he established his own consulting business where he advised major BC forest corporations and other businesses on solutions to problems facing the environment. You might well have heard of Bob on CBC's panel on the island. Over 12 years, he was a panelist on the political group that spoke weekly about both BC and other national political issues. He also appeared on Vaughn Palmer's show, Voice of the Province, for a number of years, also wrote extensively in newspapers on political issues facing our province. This year, as well as in 2005 and 2009, Bob was a director of the provincial No to Proportional Representation campaign. So he's been a consistent and energetic and diligent participant in this important debate in our province, and we're lucky to have him here again with us tonight. So thank you both for being here, gentlemen. Our format tonight is at a flip of a coin, done very scientifically. We've chosen the order of speakers. Teale will start first with a 10-minute opening statement on the yes side, followed immediately by Bob for 10 minutes as well. And I understand we will then go to questions that have been collected from the audience, and I will randomly select 4 at a time. If your name is called, the microphone will be provided for you if you come up to the front here in the aisle if you're able to. And we will ask questions to the speakers. Your questions may be to one or to the other or to both speakers. Both speakers have been issued what are called wild cards. So if there's a question that they've not been asked but they would like to respond to, they can indicate they'd like to play one of their wild cards and speak to the other question that the other debater has responded to. How that will work, we will see. In the wild card, they will get an opportunity to either challenge or to respond to up to 2 minutes on that. So isn't that exciting, gentlemen? Isn't that exciting? There we go. I hear there's a car as a prize later too. So anyways, we'll see how the time is. We've promised to wrap up by 8:30 because Mr. Plecas has another commitment speaking on, I think, the same issue somewhere else in our community. And so as we get close to 8:30, we'll need to provide opportunity for closing remarks by both of them of up to 3 minutes. So we'll keep an eye on our watches on that. My timekeeper is here to keep us all on the straight and narrow with a red card for please cut off. But I think before that is I can't even tell the difference in the colors. That's orange, okay? Can we all recognize that as orange, gentlemen? Look at everyone leaning in there. That's the orange. That means you have 10 seconds left. The red is, so we're pretty tight here on the wire on that. So, okay, no further ado, let me introduce Teale and open the debate. You have 10 minutes, sir, starting now.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much all for coming out today. I know that tune's going to be stuck in my head, and also very big thank you to Dr. Lohr for the explanations. That saves a lot of time in my speech, so I can dedicate it more to talking about proportional representation. And I'm very happy to be here to talk about this important issue for British Columbia, and I'm very happy to represent the side in favor of proportional representation. The truth is that we need change in our province. The current first-past-the-post voting system is archaic, it's polarizing, it's unstable, and it's unfair. The first-past-the-post system distorts the wishes of voters, and it leads to false majorities. So this is when a party wins, the majority of the, has less than the majority of the seats, of the votes, but has a majority of the seats. Now, we've seen this in the recent Ontario election, right? Doug Ford has 40% of the vote, 60% of the seats, but 100% of the power. Same thing happened in Quebec, right? François Legault and the CAQ has about 38% of the vote, but 100% of the power. And so now the CAQ get to implement its bigoted and racist policies that 62% of people in Quebec do not support. And this is how first past the post not only gets extremists seats, but gives them government. Big tent parties under first past the post invite extremists in and they take over. And false majorities are very common. In the past half a century here in British Columbia, we've only had one government with the true majority. Now, the no side is going to say that the current system is stable, but this could not be further from the truth. Under first past the post, tiny changes in the popular vote lead to dramatic shifts in party standings. This means that power fluctuates wildly between left and between right, and what results in what we call policy lurch. And that's where the incoming government spends a good portion of its time and a good portion of your money reversing the policies and undoing the work of the previous government. And we see this with Trump undoing the work of Obama. We see this in Ontario, where Doug Ford is savaging environmental policies that have been supported in Ontario for decades. Actually, we saw this the other day with the BC Liberals. They just passed at their convention a policy to bring back MSP if they ever form government again. So this is that back and forward lurching that doesn't lead to stability. And stability is important, right? Sound public policy is important because we face critical issues like climate change. We can't afford this kinds of lurch. We need to act now. We need stability to solve these critical issues. But we also need to move beyond the toxic partisan politics that's fostered by the absolute first-past-the-post system. You know, rather than conversations about good ideas and positive visions, the campaigns of first-past-the-post are fought with vicious partisanship and mudslinging. We've all seen this, right? And friends, we can do better. We need an open, fair, inclusive electoral system, one that fosters cooperation, collaboration, stability, and respect. We need a system based on proportional representation. This is the principle is very fair. We've already, very simple, we heard Dr. Lohr already explain it. If you win 30% of the vote, you get 30% of the seats and 30% of the power. It's simple, it's fair. Now, PR is a modern voting system that changes the way we do politics. In any other realm of society, whether you're in business or in school or working in a community organization, we favor collaboration and cooperation. This is the future of business. It's the future of working together. It's people working in teams, solving problems collaboratively together. And under PR, parties need to work together to solve problems and to govern. There's a more respectful discourse under PR. Parties find common ground, they cooperate in order to get things done for you and I. And this is in stark contrast to that vicious, mudslinging, adversarial politics of first past the post, the partisanship that we all probably don't appreciate. But not only that, under PR, it does a better job at delivering stable governments. Unlike the lurch of first past the post, under PR, laws need to pass and only pass if they have the support of parties with 50% or more of popular support. So that leads to lasting change and strong policies that everybody can get behind. And governments and politicians under PR are more accountable. Because every vote counts, every voter matters. So under the current winner-takes-all system, parties can ignore people, right? Because you can govern on 40%, you can afford to ignore the other 60%. We've actually seen this in the province over the past 16 years, right? Christy Clark and the Liberals, with their 40%, maintained power. Meanwhile, we had a growing housing crisis, a growing opioid crisis, and affordability was becoming insurmountable, right? The BC Liberals could afford to ignore these issues because their 40% of the vote didn't care or didn't necessarily engage with these issues, right? So under PR, parties are forced to reach out to other voters because they need every single percentage they can get. And once you're in government, other parties hold each other to account. We've kind of seen this already with the Green and NDP coalition, where the NDP is being held accountable to its electoral promises by the Greens. This is a unique situation under first past the post, or a rather rare situation, and it's one that's produced this great situation for us today so we can actually vote to change our political system to a fairer system. So PR is just the upgrade our electoral system needs. 80% of industrialized democracies use a system of proportional representation, and in these countries there's less inequality. These countries score higher on the United Nations Index of Human Development, which incorporates education, standards of living, and health indicators. And empirical research shows that PR countries outperform first past the post on measures of democracy, quality of life, income inequality, diversity among representatives, values of tolerance, environmental performance, and fiscal policy. And the reason why this is the case is because PR is stable and has caring governments that care about their voters. Now, there's another important effect that PR has, and that it increases voter turnout. The evidence shows that voter turnout goes 8% up under PR, and for young people, it's 12%. You can look around. We can certainly use some more young people engaged in politics, and so that's an important step to engaging more people. And this is because when people feel as though their vote counts, they're more likely to vote. So in this referendum, you're faced with a couple of options. We've already had Dr. Lohr explain them, and these systems vary different ways. They emphasize different aspects. But in a sense, they're all coming down to the same thing: proportionality and fairness. Now, I just posted a video on my Twitter if you want some more visuals and a short video clip to learn more about the different systems. And if you're still not sure which system is for you, I recommend going to referendumguide.ca. And there's a very helpful quiz there that will ask you questions about your values, and then you can respond, and it will tell you which system most likely fits your values. Or simply vote yes on the first question, and you don't need to fill in the other 3 questions. So I want to finish off by pointing out some of the qualities that these 3 systems share. Under these 3 systems, local representation is maintained. So you will still have your local MLA. Not only that, but you'll have regional MLAs, which I really like because it increases the chances that your MLA will share your values. I grew up as a New Democrat in Alberta, and I can tell you that that was a nice challenge to find an MLA that shared my values back in the day. Not only that, but building on the recommendation of 13 citizens' assemblies and royal commissions, All three systems have a 5% threshold for a party to earn a seat in the legislature. Now, that's about 100,000 votes, and that's a way of excluding extremist parties and keeping control of the council. And just for context, in the last provincial election, the Libertarian Party, which ran 30 candidates, they earned 0.4% of the vote. So if they wanted to make it onto the board, they would require another 93,000 votes. And the best part is that after 2 election cycles, we have a second referendum to confirm the new system. So in a sense, we get to try out a new system, see if it works for us, and we have another chance to say if we liked it. And it's worth noting that all the countries that have changed to a PR system and that have been given this option, none of them have voted to go back. All of them like PR. So look, if you're tired of fear-based campaigning, of hyper-partisanship, of wasted votes, and of false majorities, all of these things created under first past the post. And if you want a voting system that produces stable governments, that promotes respect, cooperation, and fairness, I recommend that you vote yes to proportional representation. And I'm very much looking forward to your questions, and to the person who brought their ballot, I hope you'll fill it in after the debate. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Teale. Nicely on time. Now I'll introduce and invite Bob Plecas to speak to the no side. Bob, over to you for 10 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to sit because I had a knee replacement 4 months ago. So standing up and doing all that's not in the cards tonight. I did, though, manage to get away on the weekend. Went down to the United States and came home on Monday. And I just realized this as I was hearing Teale go on about the system. But happens every time I come home. I just sit back and say, you know, I returned to the best city in the best province, in the best country in the world. And I just believe that in my heart. And I also would like to respectively acknowledge, I'm sorry. I don't usually use these because I can shout so loud that I drive people crazy. I'd like to respectfully acknowledge speaking tonight on the traditional territories of the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations and thank the organizers of this community debate. In 2004, the government established a citizens' assembly. They recommended a specific alternative to our system. There were two hurdles to pass, and pro-rep came close but failed. A second referendum in 2009 with a clear choice again, same rules but with constituency maps, but pro-rep failed again. This is our third go in 13 years. And it's the first time, however, there's no clear choice between two systems. If you get a chance tonight, go to pages 69, 71, and 74 in the report of the Attorney General Abey to Cabinet. You'll find lists with 36 outstanding issues that remain to be decided by politicians after you vote. There's some overlap. Obviously, it would have been better for us voters for government to take the time to complete the information, the maps, as they promised before the election, or during the election, and give us a clear choice. Attorney General says the questions are details that are largely technical but can have a significant effect. This is spin. Constituency maps are not details. The choice of party list choices determine if regional people make up party lists or not. This is not technical. Are you in a rural or urban constituency determines what system you use. This is essential to your decision. What we, the voter, is asked is to take a leap of faith, rely on the 7 feared words. Trust us. We're from the government. So what's on offer? First past the post, the 87 constituency. Each one elects 1 member. Parties nominate individuals. The community seek election after 28 days. The one who gets the most votes wins. The person is directly accountable to the voters. Simple, stable, successful is what we've done here for a very long time. But what are the pro-rep choices? Well, dual member, not used anywhere in the world. Simple explanation, you combine 2 constituencies into one and you vote for 2 members. But nothing is simple here. There are problems. The largest rural ridings remain as as first past the post. Which ones? We don't know. To be decided by the politicians. But let's combine 2 urban ridings and see what happens. The first MLA is elected under first past the post. We'll call this person Horrigan, and he gets 1,000 votes. The second person, James, gets 950 votes. She waits. Every second place finisher is vulnerable. Now the computer turns on. It starts with the percentage of vote every province got party-wide. For a test, I use the results from the last election. The Green Party needs to pick up 10 seats to add to the 3 they won under first past the post to be proportional. The computer needs to find 10 seats. It decides that James is replaced by a person from the list from the Green Party. This procedure will apply to NDP and Liberal members using last election's data who finished second all over the province until 10 second place winners are knocked off. Your local voters' wishes are irrelevant. The computer does the work. I know I will be upset if Carol James lost her seat in this way in the next election. And I think all hell will break loose in 10 constituencies across the province when local people who are placed second are denied seats in the legislature because the computer decides a party list person gets the seat to make the province proportional. Is rural-urban, not used anywhere in the world. The first premier I worked for who focused on the province's rural-urban divide was Premier Clark. That's Glenn. This option makes this worse. It proposes we split the province into urban ridings which will use STV. Mr. Eby's comments, the ballot is simple, but the vote counting rules are complex. The goal is to give rural ridings some degree of proportionality and urban people full proportionality. The result, the rural-urban divide is underlined. But to make you feel better, here in the urban riding, the Droop formula will again be used to determine the electoral quota under STV, but improved this time by adding the weighted inclusive Gregory method to distribute the surplus votes, as all surplus votes are transferred as a fraction. Do you have any idea what a surplus vote is? Don't worry, Siri will figure it out for you. 2 systems, one for rural folks, one for big city. That leaves MMP, used nationally in 4 countries and half dozens in hybrid systems. I'm going to place this discussion in a broader context. I will come to Germany, which uses MMP as part of a larger European trend, and then come back to it at the end. The countries in Europe that use pro-rep are having electoral troubles. They started around the turn of this century. For example, Sweden's recent election saw the Swedish Democrats Party, a neo-Nazi party, hold the balance of power between the coalitions that make up the center-right and center-left. Sarah de Lange, a political scientist at the University of Amsterdam, says simply, the bigger parties are getting smaller and the smaller parties are getting bigger. Across Europe, the last century old mainstream parties of the left and right are retreating, making coalition forming harder. The trend in Europe is fourfold: the decline of major centrist parties, the onward march of the far-right neo-Nazis, the rise of the far-left communist-based ideological parties, and the rise of a plethora of smaller parties. For example, in the Netherlands, the percentage of the vote for the center-right and center-left has fallen from 80% to 40% over the last few decades. In their last election, 28 parties ran, 13 were elected. A major problem is that smaller one-issue parties demand high prices for the special interest to support minority governments. Those demands are either expensive or on the border of mainstream policy. Immigration has accelerated and exacerbated this problem. Carl Bildt, the former Swedish Prime Minister, said after the recent Swedish election, The bottom line is that Sweden is just another European country, a fractured political landscape with the extremes doing better, including a populist party on the right. Germany's center-right party have lost 27% of their support since the beginning of this century. Remember, it's an MMP system. In theory, half the parliament is first past the post, half proportional. In Germany's last September 23rd election, the far-right anti-Islam, anti-immigrant, Alternative for Germany, neo-Nazis surged to regional wins and won 11% of the vote. The AfD won 3 seats under first past the post. The computer gave them an additional 91 seats. But not just on the right. Die Linke, the left, the communists, won 5 seats under first past the post and were awarded 64 with 8% of the vote. The Greens elected 1 and now have 67 seats. Free Democracy won no seats. They now have 80 in the Bundestag. I want to be very clear here. Proportional representation did not cause the rise of these radical or populist parties. However, it enables them, in my opinion, to gain a disproportionate share of the number of seats in their parliament, gain party status, and this legitimizes their message. In the last 2 provincial elections, in the last month, Bavaria and Hesse produced the same results, and this was the reason Merkel announced that she would resign. Now, okay. There's a question here that you need to ask. Will we give them a platform that legitimizes their interests? Will their small one-issue parties hold the balance of power? A better question, I think, is why would we take the risk? Thank you.
Oh, we have a wild card being exercised. Teale, you.
I wanted to respond to some of those comments from Bob here because I think there's some alarming things that he was saying. First of all, I wanted to say that I heard a lot of fear-mongering. You know, the stomping jackboot ads. We've all seen them on television. But look, what I didn't hear was a single thing good about first past the post. And that's because there's nothing good to say about it. So I'm waiting for him to say a few things here today about that. Yes, the first thing he mentioned in his speech as well was the idea that there's issues that remain to be resolved. This is true. But if you look at those issues like boundaries, those aren't issues that have to be decided by politicians. In fact, and he should know this, it's wrong for those to be decided by politicians. Issues like boundaries should be decided by non-partisan, unbiased commissions, and they are in British Columbia. So look, this is part of the fear-mongering style campaign that we see from the no side, and I would urge you to turn to the yes side, where we have hope and optimism and a position where there's respect, and where we're talking about information that's accurate and we're not fear-mongering.
Now we're going to be taking questions. So do we have any names or the box that's been collected? We should have a collection. Oh, here we come up here. Okay, we've got. Thank you very much. I guess you want to open them up and.
Yeah. Okay. There's one. Okay. 2. Yep. And we'll do one for me.
Apologies if I mispronounce names. Some of the writing isn't as clear as I'd Riga Godwin, if your name has been called out, if you can come to the microphone. Also Patricia Lane. One just simply says Sarah. Hope there aren't too many Sarahs in the room who just wrote Sarah. And Jessica Vanderveen. Those are the 4 people whose names have been drawn, and if you'd like to come up to the microphone one at a time. And in 1 minute or less, if you could just pose your question, and if you could identify whether you're posing it to one or the other or to both our speakers, that would be helpful. So, shall we begin?
No, it's not Sorry. Okay. My name is Rika Godrin, and my question is for Teale and Bob. I have a question about both systems and how independents can be represented. I'm concerned that if we move to proportional representation, we're going to end up like the US, where it's just major parties and independents won't have a voice. Because if you have to get 5% to even have seats, I mean, if there's only 87 seats, you can't get 5% in one riding.
So the role of independents, gentlemen, under the PR systems and or under first past the post. So I think, Teale, it's really a question to your, and then Bob would like to.
Thank you very much for your question. I think this also leads into some of the conversation we're having about of different kinds of parties that will be represented in different kinds of groups. The position an independent has in both the current system and a PR system is a challenging one. And I don't think it's largely impacted either way. I think Dr. Lohr mentioned that in the introduction. It's still very difficult for one individual without a party to do well. One of the things that's been included in all three of the PR models, and this is building on multiple commissions and consultations, is the 5% quota, not quota rather, but the bar that parties need to achieve. And this is there because you need to establish that a party has broad-based support. And so if you look at the numbers in the last election, I mentioned the Libertarians in my speech, but for example, right here in Vancouver Island, the Vancouver Island Party, who ran 4 candidates, got 646 votes, which is 0.03% of the vote. They're not going to be represented, and they're currently not. So this system, I think the bar is really useful because it restricts access to the legislature to parties that have broad-based popular support, and it represents them proportionally, which I think is both fair and a good system.
Yeah,
I thought that's what I was going to say.
Okay, Bob?
It's still tough either way.
Yeah. Bob, would you like to address it? I mean, we don't have many independents under FPT systems, but you'd like to speak to the broader question?
There's one of the little mention of independence in the package, but an independent would not have much of a chance, as they don't now. But under first past the post, we have had sitting in the legislature for the last while an independent and a couple independents. That's not that unusual that a popular person in a particular region can get into the parliament. I think the difficulty is regional, when you're an independent person and you're on a party list, if you're a party list person, if we look at, for example, in New Zealand, where they have mixed member proportional, they've just passed a bill called the WACA Jumping Bill, believe it or not. And what that does is say you can't leave the party. If you leave the party, you're gone from Parliament, and the next person on the list takes your place. And that's something that I think you don't have independence at that point, because you're either a party member or you're gone.
Okay, could we get one of the other individuals' names who's been pulled? Sarah or Jessica or Patricia? So who's up next? Please identify yourself, and you have up to a minute to ask a specific question to one or both of our speakers.
I
Thank
think
you.
for people who really do want independence, that the rural-urban option is the best one. The reality is that under first past the post, there's an overwhelming tendency to pool into big tent parties, because small parties like the Conservatives, for example, just don't have much of a chance. They have to go into the big tent party. And that's what really worries me about first past the post. So I think it's absolutely untenable that we would have a premier like Doug Ford, who 5 years ago was a crack-smoking, prostitute-using, woman-hating, younger, not quite so bright brother of the mayor of Toronto. He is now running the third largest economic unit on the continent.
Question,
and
please.
That's
Question.
Scary. So I'd like to know, Teale and Bob, how First Past the Post can protect us against the Jason Kennys of this country, and also who can protect us against the Doug Fords and Donald Trumps of this country. How does proportional representation do that, and how does First Past the Post?
Okay, thank you. Bob, you go first, then Teale.
I mean, I think in this province we're fortunate that we have, for example, recall legislation. I drafted the first draft of that and put it into the House. I think we have this, but I also think this, and I want to come back to the fact that we have in this province had governments elected, obviously, with not 50% of the vote. But we've also had premiers in this province who have built this province. W.A.C. Bennett elected 6 times. Dave Barrett, the best premier, I started with him. 39% of the vote, best labor code in the country, Human Rights Act, Agricultural Land Reserve. These are people who recognized this province needed building. Bill Bennett did the Ombudsman and did the Auditor General and the Expo. I mean, I think we've been fortunate when the NDP came in again, Nishka Treaty, Columbia Basin, new hospitals. I think independents have trouble, but I think we have a way of kicking them out, and I think First Past the Post has a way of kicking people out, and I think even in the United States, fortunately, we saw the Democrats take back the Congress. So I think an independent individual has difficulty in our system or in any other system making a huge impression on the political face of government.
I think that unless they've taken over a party and are currently elected as Premier of Ontario, so I think that kind of walks in the face of that. I didn't hear a lot about why First Past the Post or how First Past the Post stops Big Tent parties from being captured by extremists, and the answer is it doesn't. And they're currently being captured as we speak in Quebec and Ontario and the United States, and that's a huge problem with the current system. One of the things that I like about proportional representation, in addition to the 5% threshold, which is a rather high bar, that's 100,000 votes. I must say it's maybe 90 times more than I've ever received or more. But not only that, but you know, we heard Bob up here at the beginning of his speech talking about small rumps in Europe of radicals, and they're shunned by the other parties. The reason why the system in Sweden is taking so much time to develop a government is because the other elected officials don't want to work with the racists. So in this way, PR has a stopgap, has a safety valve to stop extremists from having a say in that sense. And I think that's really effective, and it's one of the strengths of PR. And also I should point out that the decisions that are made under PR are ones that are made with support of 50% of the population. And so you get stronger support. So that's more than a history lesson, that's fact. And it shows that PR does work, and it keeps extremists where they should be, which is in the margins, and it lets the governing parties get on to making decisions which have popular support.
Okay, yep. We'll call this one of your wild cards, Bob. There you go.
I'll just say this. In Sweden, you got 144 people who are on the left of center, and they're in a coalition already. And on the other side, have I got my numbers right? You got 143, and the right of center have 4 parties in their coalition. And on the left, there's 3 parties in the coalition. The 3 parties in the coalition on the left will work together, but they won't work with anybody on the right. The 4 parties on the right, they'll work together, but they won't work with anybody on the left. And stuck in the middle with 62 seats are the neo-Nazis. And neither will work with them, but they won't work with each other in this nirvana that you paint, that somehow they all get along. And those little parties are what's making Angela Merkel resign. She lost the election in the Bavaria 2 weeks ago. She lost the election in Hesse last week. In those lands, provinces, they lost 20% of the vote between the center right and center left. These small parties are taking over and make it incredibly difficult to form a coalition government because they won't get along, and their demands are so great that it just